can't remember who sent me this, but a number of you have asked for My Children, My Africa. So let's just look at the questions. Right, you've got to decide here what is most important about them. Look, you've got a lot of space. I would say look at their background, born, brought up, where they're living now. Obviously, you're going to look at the town versus the township experience. And is this the paper which asks about the sheltered life? I'm not sure. But you might look at Isabel's lack of contact. So their experience of race relations and separation, apartheid, those kinds of things. Notice you've got to do Tami and Isabel. So I would say, let's say, Tami born in the Cape, but now living in the Eastern Cape, Cape Town to the Eastern Cape, and why? Isabel born and brought up in this little town, the township school versus the white school, and you're virtually at the 4 marks. And then race and separation, right? You could look at the fact, you remember when Isabel's standing in the classroom and she looks around and she says, how does anybody even learn here? It's all concrete and grey and really awful, and she comes from a much more privileged background. Right. This is story, this is story. Let's look at tone. Tone is feeling. It's how the speaker feels. So, he says, come to order. So, what is going on? They are arguing, they're talking over each other. He's going to grab the bell and rings it violently. So is he saying, come to order? Come to order. No, he's saying, come to order. It's much, much more. So what is his tone? His tone is, now, please, it's not loud or soft. It is forceful, possibly, commanding, authoritative, demanding. Then consider the play as a whole. Irony. Remember what we said about irony. So, Tami says that they should have a different syllabus. What is the irony? So here Tami is arguing, but it's very tongue-in-cheek, for a different syllabus for men and women, boys and girls, depending on their gender. But, remember, Tami ultimately will fight for equal education for everyone, because fundamentally there's a difference in the education given to whites and the education given to blacks. So he's arguing for a separation in education, but in fact his whole struggle is for equal education. Right, 2 similarities in the characters. Remember, you're looking for what they are like as people rather than they're debating or they're arguing. So I would say we're looking at intelligent and confident. If you look at their debate, go back to the question, 2 similarities. Oh, well, I've got 2 similarities, okay? State, I just have to state them. Oh, wow, easy peasy. Theme, oh, I don't like this. I really don't, but what can I do? Why I think it's a bad idea to say order versus disorder is then if I ask you, what does that mean? You can't give it back to me. So if we're saying order in South Africa in the 1980s is an order that is dictated by a white racist government. And disorder for that white racist government is called activism in the townships. So do you see, I just don't like order versus disorder. What are we talking about? Order versus disorder in Macbeth. What are we talking about? Order versus disorder in Hamlet. What are we talking about? So I want you to push it to a sentence. Okay, so we've got to do it evident in this extract. Okay, so what are we looking at? We're looking at the order of a debate, which means that a debate is run by rules. And the disorder is when the students do not follow those rules. So they shout over each other or they talk over each other or whatever. Okay. Right, so then is he a good teacher? You need to decide on what makes a good teacher, first of all, and then explain if he is a good teacher in the play. Right. Where do we go to here? Okay, we're still dealing with my children, my Africa. This is vocab. Look it up. Okay. Identify the figure of speech. Okay, so let's look at the line. It is line 6. Not yet. All his friends were. It's swimming around everywhere, Isabel. So go back. You're fishing for something. I'm fishing for trouble. I'm fishing for trouble. I'm trying to catch it. Is he in trouble? Not yet, but it's swimming around. So trouble is being described as a fish or any other creature that swims around. So what figure of speech have we got? We've got a metaphor. Right, explain why it's appropriate. Because Mr. M sees himself as somebody who is fishing for trouble and he wants to catch it and kind of neutralize it. But trouble is, I don't want to say it's loose, but it's free. It's not controlled. And as a result, it's dangerous because it could hurt somebody, specifically Tommy. Quote 5 consecutive words. I think that's easy enough. This is story, so that's easy enough. Okay, splitting. Splitting is when Mr. M goes to the police and he gives them information about the activists, the student activists, the student leaders. And the consequences, the township turns against him and he dies. Now this question. Everybody who does a drama, if you're home language or foul, you get, if you were the director of this play. So one of my colleagues says that this, in effect, is a character question. So let's have a look what you're asked here. Which 2 things would you tell Isabel to do when saying these lines? Now remember, you have to have a reason. You cannot say, I would tell Isabel to walk around the stage. Okay, one of the worst answers I ever got is, how would you tell Macbeth to deliver these lines? I tell him to go to the back of the stage where it's darkest, crouch down and deliver these lines. Think about it, where the audience can't see you and the audience can't hear you. Please be sensible. I know we're not expecting you to be creative, amazing directors, just reasonable. So what would she do? You need to look at saying these lines. What would she do and why? Right? State 2 characteristics that are evident from her reaction. How is she feeling? So what does she feel and that you can see in these lines? In home language, you usually get, as the director, what would you tell them to do? Body language, movement, and how would you tell them to create the feeling, the tone? Again, look at what they're feeling, why they're feeling, what they would do in context. It's a character question. Right, explain why it's true. Sheltered life, she doesn't know a lot about what's going on in the townships. Attitude, how does he feel about student protest? Well, we know he opposes student protest, you'd explain. And then, is the title suitable? I would go to where this appears in the play, how Mr. M is feeling about it, the importance of children, the future, education, and so on. Right, I've got hardly any time left. Now I'm looking at this poem at last. Right, so the speaker goes back to his school where the teachers try to mold him and guide him. What do we see? Plants are growing everywhere. The roof, the doors, the windows, everything's gone. He asks a question. Can these walls still recognize me? Obviously, the answer is no, they can't. They can't recognize. They're not people. Everything has changed. He talks about the playground. Pummel is when you've got your fists you like that. It's not qua, it's that. And he assaulted him quite badly, almost to a pulp. And we're told that corner of the playground is scarfed with wattle. Wattle are trees. So if you think about a scarf goes round your neck. So the scarfed with wattle, the wattle trees are growing around the playground. So we have a metaphor there. And you'd say, in the same way that a scarf does this, so the trees are doing that. Then we come to the church. Notice the personification here. And the cemetery is silent, a reminder of the past. Who's in the cemetery? Whites. So we're reminded of racist segregation. We go to what we've just been talking about in My Children, My Africa, where you have one group of the population given an inadequate education. The whites were part of this community, were they? Were they really? They made monumental contributions. Did they really? All we have on the headstones is when they lived and when they died. And he tells us that everything in Lushington, the little place that he's visiting, has changed except the graveyard. So we've got the whites buried in the graveyard, but still a sense of, again, desolation, loss, the school dilapidated, ruined. And so the mood of the poem, the feeling that he has and the feelings that we have is of despair and hopelessness. A community divided on racial grounds. A community where people did not show the love, Christian love. What are we told? Love your neighbor, where it didn't really happen. And so we have that sense of desolation if we go back to Cry the Beloved Country.